And what this is a collection of individual reflections that are based on a particular scene or image, a particular moment in time. It could be a moment in a story, like a biblical story, say Jesus transfigured on the mountaintop, or the Annunciation of Mary. But it doesn't have to be a biblical story. It might be a moment in time in a personal story. So the place of individual narrative is very important in this perspective. How can we use a moment in time in your life or my life as a starting point for a reflection of faith? And so that's what this book does. And it has a collection of images, like 53 or so in all, so that it could be used by someone on a weekly basis or any other basis that a person might want to do. But turning the page the next day, the next week, whenever desired, using an image of faith as a starting point for a deeper reflection. So it starts with experience. So what I've done in many cases is describe a particular experience of mine. Although in other cases it might be a moment in time in a scriptural story, or a story about someone I know, or even a story described in another book. But using that moment in time as a jumping off point, as a starting point for faith, it then draws together all the images, all the visuals that might have been in that moment, and then goes on for further reflection, and then finally invites the reader or the hearer to offer their own response. So in each of these reflections in the book, I'm just showing you here, there's actually open space left in the publication itself, so that the reader can then offer his or her own reflection by way of response. There's also extended space in the back. So after each one of these reflections, there's a time, a space for a response. Now also, you can notice even in this image here, that each of the reflections is paired with an actual visual image. So the method is essentially image and imagination. Now, the image is not an illustration in the sense it doesn't just summarize what goes on in the text of the reflection, but rather it relates to it in a way that evokes more consideration, evokes more in the heart and the soul of the reader, I hope. And the idea being that since we're talking image and imagination, it's not just words, it's also an image that the reader may encounter and view and see and in a way be changed by. And indeed, there's even space for drawings that the person who uses this book may also use. In fact, one addition that the publisher made that I especially appreciated, at the back of the book, there's even a pocket so that if someone uses the book and makes their own drawings or has other items that they want to relate to the message and the method of this book, they can keep it. So the idea is the book itself is interactive between me, the author, and the reader, so that each person's book will ultimately be unique. It'll have my reflection, but it also invites the other person's reflection. The hope being it's a keeper, something that you want to come back to or perhaps add to over time. So in this whole process, though, it has a collection of musings, reflections, starting points for further reflection from me. But the most important thing about it isn't to say, well, isn't that a great collection of reflections, but that by reading them, seeing them, using them, that the person who engages this book comes away with an appreciation of the method that I'm using here, so you can use it, so you can carry it forward with your own reflections. It's not just what did I do, but what can you do with it? And so in that sense, it's a methods approach to seeing and believing. The hope that the reader, the one who engages this book, can in a way see with new eyes, be deepened in faith, by use of this book and seeing the images. There are also about 3 poems that I wrote that are included in the book as well. You don't have to do your own poetry for this, but you can. But so it has prose, it has images, it has poems, and it has available space for reflection. I especially appreciate the way the publisher, this is published by Forward Movement Publications in Cincinnati, has done this book. And these are some of the publisher's suggestions that were implemented so that, for instance, it has a wire-bound binding so that the book will lay flat on a table so that when the reader uses it, there's an easy surface to use. If someone wants to draw a picture, just write a reflection, write a poem, or even just spread it out and have it in front of you for a devotional purpose. It's not like you're always kind of bending it back. So I really appreciate the way that the publisher has presented this collection of reflections. And it is available through Forward Movement Publications online, and I believe it will be available through Amazon. For some time, I've been exploring for myself the engagement of image as a starting point for faith. One of the theologians I studied, Austin Farrer, actually used the image of like light in a magnifying glass. He was British, so he called it light in a burning glass. But anyways, light in a magnifying glass. But the idea is so you've got light all over everywhere, but then when it comes through the magnifying glass, it can be focused to a single point. And the idea is that each of these images serves as that kind of focal point, that kind of magnifying glass, so that truths that we encounter all the time, impressions that we experience all the time, can be focused through this lens, through this magnifying glass, if you will, to a single clear point. And so that's been a topic of mine of interest for some while. And sometimes I'd be going along and just experience a moment in time, something that I would see, something someone would say, an experience I would have, or even just a particularly moving moment in a biblical passage or a book I was reading, and say, wow, that's a keeper. That's a point of focus that can be helpful for me, but not just for me. By sharing it, it makes it easy for someone else to get what I was experiencing, so that things that are harder to explain rationally, explain in reasonable kind of orderly paragraphs, can sometimes be conveyed by an image. As the saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So it's like you've got real pictures here and also word pictures that are the starting point for a reflection. So with that method, I've been able to go forward in a number of venues. One has been some of the courses I've taught here at St. Catherine College. And one of the first courses I taught here, Explorations in Christian Theology, there were a couple of students who really got what I was talking about and indeed were encouraging to me in carrying this forward. But I've also used this in the context of like a parish retreat, an evening study program, illustrations in sermons, so that in a variety of ways this method has been useful, has been a way of sharing faith with others, a way of sharing an experience with others, a way of getting past the kind of rational, reasonable boundaries that we put up sometime to get underneath that to a more essential experience of what happened, what matters, what can be life-changing for me or for someone else.